Pop Cult Pod. This is a broadcast from an undisclosed location in Ireland known as the Pop Cult Compound, where they're crazy for film, television, video games, and much, much more. Speaking now will be the cult leader, Tompott, the host of the only podcast with an actual cult following, the Pop Cult Pod.
Run! It's Godzilla!
It looks like Godzilla, but due to international copyright laws, it's not.
Welcome to the only podcast with an actual cult following, the Pop Cult Pod. I am your leader and host, Tompott. First off, apologies for the delay of this episode. I was hoping to get it out before the weekend, but unfortunately I got my hands tied up with some work. And then for the weekend I left the compound, as I tend to do at times, to go to the cinema. And in this case it was actually to go to Slane Castle to see Metallica, so my voice might be a little bit croaky. I'm a little bit under the weather from the whole ordeal. You won't be getting the usual silky dulcet tones that you might expect from me. But of course, you might get the insight and knowledge and beauty of my brain and soul. Very great. We're not even a minute and a half into this episode and it's already a load of shite. Brilliant. Oh well. Well, let's just not waste any more time, because the longer I talk, the more nonsense I spout, and we should just go straight down to the facts, which means we're going to talk about the news in our newer segment, in that the old one is dead now. New news. Okay, so first news story I want to talk about is an odd one, because we don't really know the full story, but I think that's why it's interesting. We're talking about Swamp Thing. So in case you need a bit of a refresher, Swamp Thing is a series based on a DC Comics character that is on their new DC exclusive streaming service called DC Universe, which I think I've gone into it before. In fact, last time we talked about something, we had the issue where it got cut from 13 episodes to 10 episodes very abruptly out of nowhere. And we raised certain issues, certain concerns, which was the idea that a DC streaming service is going to be niche, it's going to have a very limited audience, and also you're learning that even more because it's only available in America. So it was a question of, is there an audience for this stuff? But onto the actual news, which is that it got cancelled. But what is shocking about this isn't just the fact that it was cancelled, is that it was cancelled after one episode, which is incredibly weird. Now, being cancelled after one episode isn't necessarily unheard of. It's happened on broadcast TV normally, network television. This is on a streaming service though. And while the episodes are airing week to week, surely they don't have the data straight away to call it a flop after just one episode. In fact, based on the reviews for it, the show was quite good. I was actually thinking of checking it out myself. The main issue is, why would you say, hey, our show is cancelled after one episode, when you still have to put out every episode on your streaming service? Is that really meant to get people excited to watch the show? Now, there's a lot of rumours and suggestion about what happened here. First of all, we have to, I guess, debunk what was being reported at the time. Initially, it was said that, I think it's, North Carolina gave them an apparent tax break where the show was filmed of 40 million, but there was a paperwork error and they were only entitled to 14 million. That's not true, which isn't really surprising that it's not true. I mean, could you imagine if that was the case, that there would have been lawsuits and a serious issue with that. Heads would have been rolling. So the question is, what did happen? Why was it cancelled after one episode? A show that's getting a good reaction generally, and what, especially even regardless of whatever happened, okay, and we still don't have an official reasoning. They're being very quiet about it. In fact, I think they were asked about it and they said, we can't answer that at this time, which is odd phrasing. First of all, it makes it sound like something very sketchy happened. But there's also the really strange decision. Even if this show, they knew the show was going to be cancelled, why would you announce it after one episode? That's going to kill any interest in the show. Why get invested in a show you know is already doomed? I don't know. Right. Here's a couple of the theories people are having. Some people are saying that it means that the DC Universe streaming service is done for, which wouldn't be altogether surprising. We really need to... I've gone into this before a couple of times now, I'm sure, how niche this whole thing is, because we're living in an age where Marvel and DC aren't just comic book companies. They're media brands. And DC Universe, when you look at what they're offering, movies that really aren't, everyone's seen them a million times. They're not the newer stuff, which is probably what will get people to subscribe. They're offering TV shows that are from sort of a bygone era. And then they have, the big selling point, I guess, aside from the new series. The new series they have is Young Justice, Titans, and Doom Patrol. Again, reviews for most of those shows have been really positive. The quality isn't the problem here. One of their big selling points, though, to the hardcore fans, I guess, to the DC fans, is that you can get access to a lot of DC comics. And again, talking about this being niche and being about a multimedia kind of franchise, as you can't really rely on the comics to move numbers anymore. Even if you love comics, I love comics, but a lot of people aren't going to pay a big high rate just to get the comics, and some people aren't interested in a lot of these shows. And then we have the other issue that it is niche, as I said, and that it's only available in America, so you're cutting off your market even more. So the question of, is this just for the hardcore DC fans? Probably. And you can't really market a whole system, a whole streaming service on just hardcore fans, especially with the high production cost of these shows. And they also have 2 other shows in production. Stargirl, I think, is one of them. I've heard they started filming for that, but I would be shocked if that made the air. If I don't know. It's hard to tell what the future for this is. Like I said, though, considering how niche this is, was it ever really viable? They have a Harley Quinn animated series. I think no one's going to... you're only getting the hardcore fans with a DC streaming service. No one that's like, oh yeah, I kind of like DC is going to buy this, because they're these are obscure properties in some cases. It doesn't mean the shows aren't good. In fact, we've seen the Titans seems to be a big success in Netflix when it's done internationally. It's just that I don't think anyone in America is going to necessarily pay for quite limited offering. It's just very... I've said the word niche 50 million times now, but that's what it is, and that's the issue. So, does it mean the end of the DC streaming service? I believe they've said no, but I can't really say yes, considering that Titans Season 2 is filming right now. I don't know if it means we're going to see a deal with other places. I think Titans has gone up internationally on Netflix in most countries. I don't know about Doom Patrol or any of their other shows. What I have heard, and there's 2 separate rumours to unpack here, is that Time Warner or Warner Brothers are launching their own streaming service, which is going to be pretty expensive, but include HBO and all that stuff, and that they're basically going to bring the DC streaming service under that label. But again, how thick do you have to be to not have done that from the beginning? I've been saying this forever. Everyone has known this, that a DC streaming service is too niche. It's not going to get many people on board. Why not just put it under a Warner Brothers label? Disney are doing that, for example. It just makes sense. Disney weren't going, hey, it's a Marvel streaming platform. It doesn't make any sense, especially because when you look at the DC streaming service, it doesn't have the current most popular DC movies or shows. It doesn't have the CW shows. It doesn't have, the DCEU films, which is ridiculous. It's an awful idea from inception. Regardless of whether it continues, I don't know how it could ever be a big success. There's also a possibility that they just ran before they could walk, they probably should have just put the service as is before launching into original series and all this stuff, and seeing how it went from there. Would have been far cheaper. Now, other people are saying that it's a question of Warner Brothers, or I guess AT&T or Time Warner, the higher ups, just not being happy with what Swamp Thing was, in that they kind of wanted a more CW-ish show, which again, that's a rumour, nothing necessarily behind that. But there's already loads of CW shows, and you have something here that's different, that's going to draw in a different demographic. Like Swamp Thing is a more obscure character, and it's darker, more violent. So you're probably trying to go for the older audience. And again, the older audience is the crowd with disposable income that would go after the service. And now it's cancelled. It's done after one episode. And even like, regardless of the reasoning, don't announce it's cancelled after one episode, because now people are just going to be even less interested in checking it out. I don't know. Some people just said they didn't exactly see the eye to eye with what the project was, or that they were kind of, I don't know. Do you know what's funny? A lot of people are talking about this lately with a few DC projects, and this one is where it copped up again. Is that it sounds like Time Warner are just embarrassed of some of the properties they own, and that's a shame, because it means that it's never going to be great because of it. It'll be held back for a lot of reasons. Like Marvel and Disney, for whatever you want to say about Disney, they clearly show a lot of faithfulness and love to the Marvel properties. They don't hide away from some of the stupider aspects or childish aspects of them. Maybe they're just embarrassed of this. I don't know. I don't think that's necessarily the case, but that's what some people have suggested. It's a shame. I'm very interested to see what happens with this DC streaming service, though. Swamp Thing's gone. One episode. So if you were looking forward to that, I mean, don't get too attached to it or enjoy it that much, I guess, because you're not going to get any more. The only other possible thing I could guess, and regardless of what the decision here was, regardless of the reasoning, this was poorly planned. Poorly planned, because how they got a whole series at great expense, and then we're like, whoa, what is this? Regardless of the reasoning, they did something awful here, planning wise, like a headless chicken. It might be that case that they're planning on using Swamp Thing in a DC movie and they didn't want to TV series. Who knows? That was the case with Arrow for a long time. They couldn't use characters that they intended to use for movies. And I don't know how many of those characters ever even made it to the movies. Then again, they were apparently working on a Flash movie, and they have a Flash TV series. So, and they're working on a Supergirl movie apparently, as well, according to recent rumor. And there was a Supergirl TV series. So again, there's probably nothing to that here. Anyway, Swamp Thing is dead. Back to the swamp with you. Let's continue in the Warner Brothers rabbit hole and talk about a very minor story actually that came out, and that is that Warner Brothers are skipping Comic-Con this year, which is a bit surprising. I would say even baffling to a certain degree. I won't say we're seeing the end of Comic-Con as we know it, or the death of it, but I think it's definitely the case where it's going to be diminishing returns at this point, because it's costing a lot of money. Sometimes they're putting a lot of money into properties that are not going to succeed. You know, the Comic-Con is meant to be for genre films, basically. And at times, that the marketing for that costs a lot of money and they're not seeing a good return on it. But I thought Warner Bros. Were going to make it because they have, I think, 3 DC films coming out between now and next Comic-Con. They have Joker, Birds of Prey, and Wonder Woman. Now, the only one we actually heard something about in answer to this was that Patty Jenkins put out a Wonder Woman poster, which was actually really cool. Really kind of trippy, visual, colourful poster, which was class. But as for Joker, maybe they just figured it comes out too soon and it's going for a darker, more hardcore vibe, and maybe they don't necessarily need the comic book fans. And again, the thing is with a lot of this stuff, the comic book fans are going to see it anyway. You need to sell it to the larger audiences. For Birds of Prey, that's what I'm surprised in there, because that one has to kind of, it's R-rated. People aren't exactly thrilled with what we've got so far. I thought they might have tried to claw back some good buzz there, but yeah, Warner Bros. Is skipping out Comic-Con. The only film that is coming from Warner Bros. That's going to be at Comic-Con this year is It Chapter 2. There's not going to be like a Warner Bros. Panel like there is most years. Now, another reason I say that Comic-Con might be not on its last legs, but changing, maybe going back to what it was originally, I guess, is that Disney are going to be there, as far as I know. Marvel are going to be there, I think, more specifically, sorry. But D23, it sounds like they're going to be there as well, so they might hold off some of their big stuff to their own expo. The D23 expo is Disney, Pixar, Star Wars, Marvel. They might hold off on some of the big reveals to then, but who knows what they're going to bring to Comic-Con. So yeah, it seems like some of these big expos are, I think companies are seeing less and less interest in them, because in this age of the internet and marketing online, it feels like you can get the same result anyway. Like the best buzz they got out of Comic-Con was when they released trailers online anyway. In fact, that was mostly Warner Bros. Put their trailers online. So Comic-Con this year, I don't know how much footage you're going to get out of Hall H, but it is what it is. So yeah, Warner Bros. Giving out Comic-Con. Who knows what it's going to be looking like this year. Speaking of E3, we want to talk about E3 all next week. All next week's show is going to be E3. It's started by now, but I want to take the time to kind of dissect what happened. You know, put my thoughts together. There's still a few panels that have to be shown. Sony aren't at E3 this year. That's what I'm kind of saying as well, about maybe people moving away from some of these big expos. But anyway, speaking of Marvel, let's talk about rumours that I guess have been propping up a lot lately, and they're not true, seemingly. So I think we should probably debunk them, or at least explain the logic behind them. I think where we need to start with this is a apparent Marvel insider. So there's a guy on Twitter, and this is where I'm going to educate you. This is where I separate the men from the boys as far as following movie news and comic book news, okay? Because people aren't aware of the naming of this guy, and I'll explain what it is now in a minute. This Twitter user, a guy called Roger Wardell, is apparently a Marvel insider, and I say apparently because, you know, you never want to say, oh, this guy's legit, and then he turns out to be crazy or incredibly wrong. But I will say this guy got a lot of accurate information about Endgame right 6 months out from the movie. I think this guy seems to be fairly legit. Now, when I was talking about following movie news and knowing your history, the name Roger Wardell actually belonged to another guy on Twitter from about maybe 5 years ago, maybe even more, who used to tweet things about Marvel movie news, and most of the stuff he put out was guesswork or wrong. And this guy seems to be legit. He doesn't tweet as often as that guy either. So I would say, as for now, this guy is accurate. But again, time will tell. Some of it is easy to, you know, just say and it go nowhere. Like I think he said something like, hey, David Morrissey is really a fan at Marvel, blah, blah, blah. He's got a load of fans at Marvel. You could see him pop up somewhere. I mean, you could say that about any actor. He pops up or he doesn't. You know, if he pops up, you're right. If he doesn't pop up, you know, they couldn't find a project for him, whatever. Things like that, not so much. But he has come up with some accurate story information and that kind of thing. The rumour that was going around this week was about a rumoured Phase 4 slate. And it came from this guy, Roger Wardell. Now, when I say it came from him, someone ran an article claiming to have spoken to him, and they hadn't. Just laziness, bad journalism, bad. Which is like, why not just speculate your own Phase 4 if you're going to do that? If you're going to be like, we got this apparent insider, we didn't speak to him, but we put it as a rumour anyway. Well, just run nonsense then, whatever. If you want to lie, just lie on your own merits rather than dragging this guy into it. Nothing. I mean, first of all, you know, I did a video on Phase 4, which is, I mean, the dating was always going to be wrong, and I gambled on a big rumour that was never going to pan out probably. But the films I think we mostly know seem probably pretty accurate. Everyone's come up with the same few films. A few of them we know already. And this rumoured slate that's going around, just to say it's not accurate, at least according to where the source of it is coming from. It's not coming from this guy Roger Wardell, and it seemed to have made up that they even spoke to him. So a lot of people have been talking about that slate this week. It's not accurate. Now, what I should say as well, another very common rumour going around is that they are looking at making a Fantastic Four film for 2022. Again, we go back to Roger Wardell, this guy, who I'm putting a lot of stock in because he seems accurate with a lot of his news stories so far. He said that's not true. Now, when this story came up, it was, they're looking at Peyton Reed. Peyton Reed really wants to direct Fantastic Four, and it's going to be set in the 60s. Here's the thing. That was something Peyton Reed wanted to do a long time ago, as far as a Fantastic Four movie. He was like, I think even back when they did the Jessica Alba Fantastic Four, he was lobbying to do a 60s set Fantastic Four movie. So it feels like they just recycled an old rumour, and we're like, yeah, look, we don't know the slate yet. Put that in there. Can we speculate on it? Is there a chance the Fantastic Four could come up in the slate? Possibly. More chance than the X-Men. Certainly. Do I think Peyton Reed is going to direct it? Nope. Not a chance. Now, again, I have nothing against Peyton Reed. I do think he did a good job with the first Ant-Man, kind of righting the ship there. no pun intended, taking over from Edgar Wright. Second Ant-Man I thought was pretty bland. I think that was his chance to really show what he was capable of himself, and apparently it's not much. If assuming they're going to do an Ant-Man 3, maybe they'll have him back. I don't think they're going to give him another Marvel property though, especially when what he's done to this point has been pretty average. Not to tear him with that brush, but it also, like, let's say this whole 60s thing. Some people are really clamoring for this. And it can work. Like, you look at something like X-Men First Class, which is 60s set, and went back to kind of the origin. I don't think that makes any sense to do the Fantastic Four in 60s set. In fact, I think it would be quite lazy to do that. Because essentially what you're doing there is you're like, let's do the Fantastic Four origin from the 60s when they were created and just not update it. Which isn't very interesting. And how like, again, there is creative ways to get around it, but where have they been in the 60 years since that the MCU has been taking place? Like, what's going on? Did they time travel to get to the modern timeline? Or again, I just think it would be pointless to do that. I don't think there's any truth to that rumor. Certainly not that Peyton Reed's going to direct it. Maybe we'll get a Fantastic Four in Phase 4. Probably during the summer what the slate is going to be, whether it be a Comic-Con or D23. But those are two rumors that have been making rounds this week that need to be brought up because they have been quite prominent, especially the Fantastic Four, and that popped up in a lot of places. Not true, apparently. I would be doubtful if either of those are true as well. Not just going off what that Wardell guy says. I don't think there's any chance they're true to begin with. One of the weirder movies to, well, not be announced, but one of the weirder movies to be, I guess, confirmed, it's coming from a reliable source, seems to be true, is a Django/Zorro movie. Now, again, obviously Django from Django and Zorro, who needs no introduction there. For the uninitiated, this was based on, there was a comic book done of this with a crossover between Django and Zorro that came out a few years ago. I think Tarantino might have had maybe a story credit or something involved in it, I'm not entirely sure. Apparently this is going to be moving forward as a movie with Jared Carmichael writing the script. Jared Carmichael is a comedian, generally. Yeah, he has some writing experience. He had his own sitcom at one stage. I mean, an odd choice anyway. What people then after that, everything else we don't know, which is we don't know if Tarantino is overseeing it, as if he's like, oh, you write it. Here's what I kind of want the story to be. We don't know, is he co-writing it? Some people even suggested there might be another writer involved as well. We don't know if Tarantino intends to direct it or not. I mean, we know nothing else aside from that, except that it's apparently happening. The big question, of course, is whether Jamie Foxx will return. Like, he returned for that Seth MacFarlane movie as Django, so I would be shocked if he didn't come back for this. Especially if Tarantino is involved, which presumably he has to be if it's his character. I don't think this will happen. I don't know. It seems very odd if this were to happen. It's just a strange crossover. I think they are working on a Zorro movie, though. Could do much worse than a Zorro Django movie. I'd be interested to see this if Tarantino's involved. Otherwise, I don't know if I'd have any interest. Seems kind of pointless. In, I guess, talking about other properties that are being revived, coming back in different forms, we have an animated series coming to Netflix from the Jurassic Park series, Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous, which, listen to this plot and tell me it doesn't sound like every plot to every Jurassic World, Jurassic Park property. When dinosaurs wreak havoc across the island, the campers are stranded. Unable to reach the outside world, they must transition from strangers to friends and ultimately family if they are to survive. Wow. Really got marks for originality there, Netflix. This is like a DreamWorks animation thing, so it's like CGI set in the world of Jurassic World. I have no interest in this, really. It's kind of for kids, I guess. Then again, I think Jurassic World was pretty kid friendly. Not the one before this. The Jurassic World 2015 was childish enough. But I guess this is going for even younger people to just have. I guess they're just going after people that like dinosaurs, and they were like, we can attach this to a brand here. I'm obviously not the demographic for this, but maybe it'll find an audience. The original cast of Jurassic Park is also apparently going to come up in Jurassic World 3. Bryce Dallas Howard was asked about this, as she was excited about sharing the screen with the cast of the original, and she said something like, oh, if that happens, I don't know. I don't know what's been confirmed or whatever, but I'll blink if it's happening. and then she had a blinking fit. So I assume they're coming back. Look, this whole Jurassic World reboot series has all been about capturing nostalgia from the originals. I mean, they more or less made the same movies, except worse, in my opinion. They brought, what's his name? Jeff Goldblum back for the last one, and it was totally wasted. He literally does narration at the start of the movie, and then a bit of narration at the end. That was not even an hour filming, I'd say. That was he came in, gave a little speech, and then left. So bring him back, sure. Bring back Sam Neill and was it Laura Linney? But I don't know if they're going to be wasted. That last Jurassic World movie, I absolutely hated it. I thought it sucked. It was so boring. And we're really looking like the future of this franchise is going to be the world taken over by dinosaurs. Which I don't know. It's going on a real B-movie territory. But I'm sure people will go to see it, especially if it's driven by nostalgia and the original cast. But I don't know. I don't think this does anything for me. These Jurassic World movies haven't done much for me to begin with. But hey, I must be in the minority. They're huge successes financially. Last bit of news I want to talk about, a little bit of TV news. And it's mostly cancellations. Yeah, it's all cancellations and shows ending this week. Silicon Valley and The Good Place, two of the best comedies on TV, are going to end. Silicon Valley is finishing up. I think I keep hearing this year, but I also find it odd that they haven't really shown much footage of the last season, considering there's only 6 months left in the year. But it's coming back for 7 episodes, and then that's going to kind of wrap it up. Silicon Valley, I think, as a show, it was amazing. It was really good, and now it's at a stage where it feels like they're prolonging the life, so I'm okay with it ending. It sort of felt like every season was like, here's a problem, and then they just resolved it and everything was fine. Now, you can only do that so many times. So I feel like the ending to it will be, well earned, and not before it gets completely unwatchable, in my opinion. It's still funny and smart times. The Good Place, Season 4, which is set to air in September, I believe. That's going to be the last one. Again, I think that's okay. Some people are pissed off with this. And look, The Good Place is a fantastic show. Really clever. There's nothing like it on network television. It's funny and it's very clever and very kind of philosophical. But it's also a show that was always going to have a limited runtime. And I feel like they were sort of dragging things out a little bit maybe the last season to keep it going. So I think it's appropriate for it to end. I'm okay with those shows ending. The other 2 shows I haven't watched at all. And one of them I was actually quite interested in seeing was Happy, which is Christopher Meloni stars. It's like based on a comic book. I think it's like he's like has a talking unicorn talk to him or something. I use when it first came out I knew the reasoning behind that. I can't remember it now. Now it just sounds like nonsense when I say that. But apparently it was quite good. A lot of people really like this. I heard even people I know who wouldn't be into this said it was very good. And it had 2 seasons that was cancelled. First season's ratings were very good. Second season did not do well ratings at all. Deadly Class also on Sci-Fi after 1 season is cancelled. I didn't hear anyone talk about this, but I did hear someone say that this was a show that if it was on Netflix would have been big. And I think, last week I went on a tear about AMC, and I don't have as big a dog on the fight as Sci-Fi. I'm not sure if I've ever watched a show on Sci-Fi, but I feel like they have a problem with that. They spent so long capitalizing on this oh yeah, Sharknado and B-movie kind of crap and cheap sci-fi knockoff, that now they're having trouble trying to launch legitimate stuff, which is a shame. I don't know if they rebranded, I think, not that long ago. So I don't know. Maybe I think these shows are both being shopped elsewhere. Maybe they'll work. I know Happy is shown exclusively to Netflix, at least in this country. So maybe we could see it be picked up elsewhere. But a lot of shows cancelled this week. Anyway, let's move on to our quick hits.
Look, up in the sky, it's a bird.
It's a plane!
Quick hits. It's been announced that we're getting a revival of the much loved, well remembered Punky Brewster. Do you remember Punky? You don't remember Punky Brewster? Okay, well, never mind then. Forget I said anything. Jeff Wadlow is set to direct a Magic 8 Ball movie along with Mattel Films and Blumhouse Productions. Will it be any good? Don't count on it. Ooh. Justin Bieber has challenged Tom Cruise to an MMA fight. I don't know what I'm meant to do with that. There's nothing funny with that. How am I meant to make a joke about that? What a random feud that came out of nowhere. And doesn't make any sense as at the moment. I mean, you gotta assume Bieber would kick his ass, right? Only because Tom Cruise is like 56 and he's... Then again though, Tom Cruise is not your normal 56-year-old man. He's crazy. Like, you can't rule him out, right? I don't know. I love that actually happened. What a weird world it would be if Tom Cruise and Justin Bieber got in a cage fight. Oh well. It is what it is. Let's move on to our trailer trash.
Trailer trash. I think it looks kind of good though.
Okay, first trailer I want to talk about this week. We've got maybe 3 or 4 trailers I want to talk about. First one is for your dad's favourite movie. Ford versus Ferrari. Okay. I'm not a motorhead. I'm not a car person. Trailer looks pretty good. I must say, up to now I thought that it was the case where Matt Damon was playing Ford and Christian Bale was playing Ferrari, or vice versa. Turns out that's not the case. They're just 2 guys hired by Ford, and basically the plot is that Ford are trying to beat Ferrari at the Le Mans 24-hour race or whatever it is. It's directed by James Mangold, who of course made Logan. And yeah, look, I don't think this is a film that's aimed at me. I don't particularly care about it. The trailer though was very well cut. The story is generally pretty interesting. I haven't looked into the reality of the story, but I understand that if you are interested in it, I think what's it called? The guys from Top Gear, Grand Tour. I think they did a sort of mini documentary on this whole story of how Ford decided they wanted to beat Ferrari. I mentioned this at the start of the year as a film I think could get some awards love. I think technically, especially with sound design and sound mixing, it could definitely have a chance. Sounds very good in the trailer, at least. It's not a sort of movie I'd think you make if you're trying to make a lot of profit. I can't see this being like a big breakout hit, but I could definitely see it getting some awards attention. Again, not for me, but looked like a pretty good trailer. And if you're a Motorhead, you could get well into this film. Maybe, I'll watch it and actually be impressed, because it seems like a good trailer. Seems like an interesting idea for a movie. It's just I'm not a car person. But if you are, check out the trailer for Ford v Ferrari. I think you'll probably enjoy it quite a bit. Next up, we had a trailer for Shaft. This was a red band trailer for the movie, which is out on Friday in America, and I had no idea. I think a lot of people don't. It really seems like they don't want this film to necessarily do that well. They don't care, I'm guessing, because it's going up on Netflix internationally, so that probably covered most of their costs. They just hope to put it in cinemas and make a tidy little profit. Trailer looks fine. The red band for this is just a bit of swearing, which is grand. I didn't expect much from the Shaft trailer. It sort of just felt like the last trailer for it, but it does look like it could be quite entertaining. Samuel L. Jackson is very charismatic, and I think he's going to get to shine in this role again. And of course we have the classic Shaft, who gets no actual look in this. Richard Roundtree is nowhere to be seen in this trailer. But look kind of funny. Could be working, and especially if it's going to be on Netflix internationally, I think it's going to be well worth a watch. Again, it's out, if you're listening to this in America, it's out on Friday. I don't think there's been much marketing or push behind it, but you can check it out then. I'm sure reviews will be out quite soon. And I'm guessing that they can't count on this doing particularly well at the box office, because anyone that's aware of this coming out is probably aware it's going to be on Netflix in 2 weeks, so they can probably just see it online illegally, which I'm guessing a lot of people are going to do. So I don't know. Shaft, check it out. If you like the last trailer, probably don't need to see this one, but it does look like it could be a bit of fun. Another trailer we got this week, which I'm pretty disappointed in, to be honest, is Rob Zombie's latest film, 3 from Hell. I like Rob Zombie's Devil's Rejects. I don't know if I've liked any other Rob Zombie movie, but I think Devil's Rejects is really good. At least that's what I thought when I saw it. If I went back, I wouldn't love it as much, because I haven't liked anything I've seen from him since then. This trailer, what a letdown in my opinion. I was really looking forward to this trailer. I was hoping he was going to try to capture that magic again. The trailer was about a minute long, and there's nothing in it. Badly made trailer, nothing really to latch onto. I don't know, and it's out in 2019, so I'm hoping there's going to be another trailer that really sells it, because this just looked very forgettable. And there's a trailer to get people on board for what is presumably quite a low budget horror film. They really have to try to sell people on it, and it didn't do that for me at all. It also doesn't answer the question of how this sequel is possible. But again, I don't expect that to be revealed in the trailer or marketing. Guess they want that to be a secret for the actual movie. But it didn't really get me any interest. You know, I was interested in this movie. And that's based on me looking down to rejects, not from this trailer. Because this trailer did absolutely nothing for me, which is a real shame. And the last trailer I want to talk about, I actually held the episode back a bit because I heard this trailer was going to be released. I was going to release this on Monday, but I heard a Frozen 2 trailer was coming out Tuesday, so I said I'd wait. And I think I've gotten more sick since then, so I've probably sound even worse. But oh well. This Frozen 2 trailer is pretty good. Visually, it looks very impressive. It looks like there's a lot of attention to detail put into it. It begins essentially with the same thing we saw in the last Frozen trailer, which is Elsa sort of fighting against the sea. Yeah, not a lot in this trailer from a story perspective. Again, they're being very secretive about this. I'm going to hold my theory that this is about Anna and Elsa's parents, and they're trying to find out what happens. And it does kind of hint at, you know, basically that there's something they don't know in their past. You know, that basically what you were told is not necessarily the truth. So that's quite interesting. I have to praise this trailer as well. It's very different tonally to the Frozen we know. It looks a bit darker, more mystical, less comedic. And again, it's a trailer. Maybe they're just pushing that idea to get people interested, but it's a very different look to the movie. And I think that's welcoming. I'm sure we'll have plenty of Olaf and songs when the actual movie is released, but they're definitely pushing a different agenda to it, which I think is welcome because, you know, Frozen was so... We're oversaturated with Frozen when it came out, so it's nice to have something that's a little bit different, which is good. And I like this trailer a lot. Visually, it worked very well. I'm interested to see what the story is. We see kind of, I guess it's like a deer, a magical kind of deer. You know, everyone's calling it Patronus like Harry Potter. That's what it looks like, really. Perhaps that could be, again, some magic that has something to do with her parents. Again, the sea is a big deal, and of course, Elsa and Anna's parents were shipwrecked, presumably killed. And we also have a massive rock giant, which is separate to those little rock creatures. I can't remember what they're called in the original Frozen. So yeah, this looks very epic. More so than the last one. The scale of it looks very impressive. And I thought the animation was very crisp and detailed, which is good to see. So Frozen 2, I mean, it's out in November. I imagine we'll probably get another trailer with a bit more story elements to it. But as for now, I'm definitely very on board with this sequel. Looks different enough where I'm interested in it. Okay, so we used to look at the box office in pretty great detail on the pod. From now on, I think I'm only going to mention it if there's some highs or lows or some surprises or flops or anything like that. And I think we should look at the box office of the last 2 weeks in a segment that I'm going to call...
what's in the box?
Office! What's in the box office? Okay, let's have a look at 2 weeks ago where we had the debut of Godzilla King of the Monsters, which pretty severely, I would say, underperformed. You know, the title of this episode, I haven't officially titled yet, but it's going to be something to do with Godzilla Is A Bomb, and that's more to do with the topic. But yeah, I think it definitely is appropriate. So it made 49 million domestically, atop the box office, pretty severely short of the original film, as in the 2014 one, which I think opened to 90 something million. It also fell short of the studio expectations. It's just not a very good number at all. And when we look at what happens the following week, it'll be even more distressing. Now, the question is why this failed. Was it bad critical reviews? Because we keep hearing like, oh, well, critically a film can underperform, but audiences will change the tide of that. You know, we most recently saw with Aladdin, which is doing very well. Aladdin's already got over 600 million worldwide. Rocketman, small budgeted film, doing incredibly well. Again, good critical reviews, but word of mouth is really helping it along. A lot of films are doing decently because of word of mouth. Something like, what's it called? Booksmart? Is that it? Yeah. Again, a film, small budget, did okay in its initial release. Subsequent weeks, word of mouth is helping it. Godzilla is not doing well at all. And the question is, why is that? Some people are saying it's that they left too big a gap. You know, 5 years is a long gap in Hollywood, you know. People have maybe moved on from Godzilla. This also seems like a very different movie to the previous ones. A lot of people weren't even aware it's like set up to this whole monster universe of, you know, Kong and Godzilla. The last one was Kong Skull Island, which I thought was a much better film than Godzilla, but we will get to that soon. And it didn't really do much to set up that world. Maybe that could have brought people over. Now, the big question is what do they do with this franchise going forward? If this is a huge underperformer, and I mean, I don't want to call it a flop, but definitely a big underperformer, because they've made their strange choice to have the release of Godzilla v Kong happen in about 9 months. It's meant to come out in March next year, which I'm assuming is going to be pretty significantly delayed, but they counted their chickens before they could hatch, and the film is done. It's filmed. I mean, obviously they're going to probably reshoot it, but they'd have to do something very significant to get this film to where they presumably want it to be a massive hit. I don't know. Maybe it's a question of Godzilla's status in America. I don't know. It's not doing well at all. Which we should come to the following week and look at the numbers there, because Godzilla is not the only underperformer there. In fact, we're at a very strange point, especially this summer, where it seems like more and more titles are just coming out and underperforming. And I wonder, people have been saying this for a long time, that we're getting to the point where there's only going to be massive blockbusters and massive losers. There's not going to be as much in between as there used to be. Because this weekend just went by, had 2 new releases, both of which also significantly underperformed. Now, one of them was never going to do great, I don't think. But it's still pretty bad. So we had Pets 2 and Dark Phoenix open this last weekend. Secret Life of Pets 2 had a pretty massive opening. The original, I think, opened with like over 100 million. This one opened with 47.1. And I can pretty much bet that they put a big marketing budget on this. I saw ads for this all over the place. It might have even had a Super Bowl spot. Now, what is the reasoning behind it failing? I don't know. People do like that original film quite a bit. Maybe it's bad awareness. Maybe it's the fact that you've got Toy Story out soon and they had no interest. Maybe people are going to see Aladdin over it if they're going after their kids' demographics. They figure maybe if the adults are taking the kids, they might enjoy something from their own childhood as well. Either way, not a great start. Again, it'll probably do fine internationally and bring its money in over time. Kids' films during the summer tend to have great legs. Again, Toy Story might hurt that chance there though. Not a good start though. It brought in apparently 16 million this weekend internationally, which is also, I would say, quite low. But that was only out of 21 markets. Okay, yeah. So it's got at least 49 million internationally so far from 30 markets overall. So not awful. Has a long way to go though to be a massive success. Probably, I don't know. Illumination might be in need of bigger hits as well, because it seems like the only thing that they consistently have is Despicable Me and the Minions. But regardless, not a great start for Pets 2. Dark Phoenix, look, no one expected this to do well. Everyone knew it was going to be a bomb. It was a question of how much of a bomb it would be, and it basically bombed a lot more than anyone expected it to. It got 33 million in its weekend. It's the first film in the whole X-Men franchise that has not got a $50 million opening. And it was well off the expectations the studio had. It was apparently they were hoping for 40 to 50 million. Well under this, obviously. X-Men Apocalypse made 65 and that sucked as well. Internationally, it brought in 107 million. Again, that was a disappointment, is my understanding. The question people are saying, oh, well, is this a big loss? And look, it's a bomb. But the thing is, it's, an acquired movie by Disney. They've spent whatever amount of million, 70 whatever billion to take in Fox. Again, the only costs I think they're having of this movie are the marketing costs. And I don't know if they market it that well, because we're obviously getting stories behind the scenes now of X-Men being like, oh, it was a mess and they rewrote stuff and blah. And one of the things I read in one of the articles was that the awareness of this film was like awful. That people were more aware that Rocket Man was out than the X-Men movie, which is not really good or even normal for an X-Men film. And again, of course, reviews were catatonic. Just doesn't help. Aladdin is doing quite well, as I already mentioned. It's all in third place, and it's third week. So that's quite impressive. What's less impressive is that Godzilla King of the Monsters in its second week fell to fourth place, a 67.5% drop, which is even steeper than the massive drop that the last Godzilla had, which is 67%. It made 15.5 million this weekend. It's, I don't think it's going to make a bit over 100 million domestically. It's going to have to make a lot of money internationally. Oh yeah, it's not a good one for Godzilla at all. It looks like at the moment it's made up nearly 300 million worldwide. It's going to fall well short of the last Godzilla and Skull Island. There's going to have to be serious retooling done to this franchise for Godzilla vs. Kong. I think that might even be, assuming this movie, as in the Godzilla vs. Kong movie, does any bit well, I think that'll be the end of the franchise, unless it's a massive runaway hit. Because Godzilla and Kong are the selling points, and if Godzilla can't sell a movie, what's the point? Anyway, I'm going to review the two big disappointments, I guess. Godzilla King of the Monsters and X-Men Dark Phoenix. I reviewed Godzilla already on my YouTube in an Any Good review. A little bit longer. Check that out. I will go into spoilers briefly here. I might do an X-Men review on YouTube as well. If I do, it'll probably be coupled with another review. I don't know how much I have to say on X-Men, but here goes. And then after that, we will get into our topic, and any spoilers will be noted during the review. Alright, so as I said, I reviewed Godzilla on my YouTube channel, if you want to check that out. It's probably a bit more, scripted. It's a bit more concise. This will be a bit more, freestyle, as the kids say, which is cool. But I will talk spoilers on the plus side. Right, I thought this movie was a massive disappointment. Personally, like I said, we did top 10 of films I was looking forward to. I'm pretty sure this film was on it. I might have to go back to that list at the end of the year because it's not a good list. I went for more popular films because they didn't want to. No one's interested to say, "Hey, I'm really looking forward to The Lighthouse." But it's not. It's this movie just really disappointed me. Didn't feel like it addressed many of the issues people have with the last Godzilla film. And here's the other thing that I hate about movies like this, where it's like some critics are way too harsh and some audience members are way too fawning, and the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Like, some people just can't accept that critics might not like this movie because they're like, oh, well, they're just saying it because it's giant monsters and I want giant monsters. But if you want that, this isn't even the best version of that. People are like, oh, it's a turn off your brain action movie. Yeah, okay, it's not though, because the action isn't very good. Turn off your brain, sure. I hate that logic where they're like, oh, a turn off your brain movie. Why? Why is there a turn off your brain movie? Why can't I understand there's guilty pleasures, and if a movie delivers on action and not story, that's one thing. But let's stop acting like we can't get great movies because they have to be turn off your brain movies. Look at some of the best action movies that came out in the last few years. They didn't say, okay, well, we're going to have great action, so don't worry about the plot. Anyway, that's a mini rant over. Okay, one of the big problems people had with the last Godzilla, as in 2014 one, was the human characters were just not interesting. I feel like they completely doubled down on that here. So many characters got added, none of any substance or interest. The main characters are Vera Farmiga, Kyle Chandler, and Millie Bobby Brown, who are like this family that were essentially ruined by the 2014 Godzilla attack. One of their kids was killed. The parents split up. The dad became an alcoholic. Of course, they're both like kind of scientists, because everyone in the Godzilla movies is a scientist or a soldier, pretty much. And yeah, not interesting. They're kind of differing ideologies, which could be interesting. And Millie Bobby Brown's character especially could have a chance to be interesting because she's stuck in between the two parents, and they don't really do anything with it. It's not that interesting. Like, some of the characters there for comedic relief. Bradley Whitford, God, he was so annoying. I hated him in this film. Not funny. Thomas Middleditch, another actor I like, wasn't funny. And who else was in this movie? O'Shea Jackson. He's a soldier. It felt like he just disappeared for a massive chunk of the movie, but he didn't have anything to do anyway. Ken Watanabe comes back. He's pointless enough in this film. He's like the same guy he was in the last movie, obviously, but he doesn't necessarily have much to do. He's just there to be like, hey, remember, this is a sequel. Okay. Yeah, it's alright. So okay, let's dismiss the human characters. Okay, dismiss those. Then let's look at the monster parts. And again, we're going to go into spoilers, and if you've seen the movie, I'll clarify some of the issues I have with this a lot more in spoilers, because you kind of have to dance around certain things here. The monsters are really well designed. They look very faithful. They look pretty cool. There is some really good moments with them. It feels like the director, to a certain degree, wanted to play with the monsters. But so much of the movie is not looking at the monsters. And look, you need a human element in the story, obviously. But the balance here is way off. There's way too much human stuff. Not enough monster stuff. It's badly shot, in my opinion. Some of the cinematography is awful. It's like that weird, like, out of focus or zooming into the action kind of thing. At bad angles at times as well. It's overproduced in that you have a lot of effects, like it's like, oh, through the smoke and through the ash, and it's raining and it's nighttime, and you can see what's going on, but it just kind of takes away from it. There are moments where the action is very good, especially at the last act of the film, but it's not overall satisfying. It feels like if they'd made a few tweaks, it would have been a lot more satisfying, that seeing that conflict and that action and those fight scenes. The other issue I had with it is that as a film, I just found it so boring. I was genuinely, and this is not exaggeration, this is not me saying like this for like, oh, that's shit on the movie. I was genuinely nearly falling asleep at this movie. I had to wake myself up at one point being like, okay, sure, the last act is going to be all monsters. Wake up. Because so much of it is just humans in boardrooms being like, can we do this? No, we can't do this. Ugh. If I had to say a few positives, I said sometimes the action is exciting. Character designs are good. I mean, the performances are decent enough overall. I don't think the characters are very interesting, but they try their best. Kyle Chandler, I think, is probably comes out with the best. There are some good visuals. There's a shot of Godzilla kind of in the water that looks quite interesting. It does a good job of building tension. The shots of Mothra at times are very interesting. There's one scene in particular where she kind of glows. That's really, really good. The colour palette of the movie as well, I quite liked, even if it was a bit over the top. But it's a big budget effects movie, so you can't give out about it too much. Anything else? Oh, the music. The music was a great highlight of the film for me. Bear McCreary rearranged some of the classic Godzilla tracks and made them really impactful. They're really kind of heavy. They're really well done. Very, very interesting. And of course, the roars of the monsters and sound design in general are very good. Even though I said this in my review already, I wish it was a bit louder. I thought it would be nice if the roars were literally like earth shattering. Maybe that. I can't take a point away for that. Maybe it was the cinema I saw it in. I don't know. But overall, I found this film disappointing, pretty boring. I can't say it got me that interested in more Godzilla movies. At least, more American ones. This felt to me like the big chance, and it didn't fully stick the landing. Okay, let's dig into some spoilers. I put a timestamp at the bottom if you want to skip ahead to my review of X-Men Dark Phoenix.
Spoiler.
Okay, so Vera Farmiga's character. I think someone said this might have been revealed in the trailer, which I guess I didn't see. That she's essentially working with the bad guys. And I was like, oh, okay. If they fully commit to it. But they don't. And it was really annoying. I was like, oh, they're gonna redeem her, but she's not redeemable. Like, basically, she's one of the main reasons all these monsters get freed. And at the end, it's like, I'll carry the bomb or whatever. I'll carry the Orca, which is their audio device for contacting the monsters and kind of controlling them. And she has to run away. They're running away from Ghidorah, and she's like, I'll take it, basically. And they try to stop her, which is ridiculous because they could have put the Orca in a helicopter. And she's like, no, because obviously she's trying to save everyone in the helicopter, including her daughter and her ex-husband. And she jumps in this Jeep, and I swear to God, she gets like 20 feet away and then gets eaten. So I'm like, oh, alright then. I guess we're meant to be like, oh, she sacrificed her life, but this is all her fault. don't try and redeem her. She's a bad person. She was working with the bad guys, and it's basically her fault they succeeded. Again, I don't know why I think they did want us to feel like, oh, she wasn't that bad after all, which was really misplaced in my opinion. What else did I not like as far as the spoiler context? They killed off Godzilla basically, and then brought him back immediately. Why? I hate when movies do that. Like they did the same thing in Black Panther where they were like, he's dead. It's like, no, he's not. We're just about halfway through the film. He's going to be back for the ending. That sound in the background a minute ago, by the way, was an airplane, not Godzilla, despite what you might think. Anyway, getting back to my point about them killing off Godzilla, basically, I mean, they were like, he's dead. Wait, he's not dead. And then they have to, give him a nuclear bomb to help him live, and then that kills Ken Watanabe. Fine. Like, they also, it was like he was in Atlantis, or the Hollow Earth, I guess, which led into that weirdness, which is odd. I didn't necessarily hate it, but it basically turns into Godzilla into like a walking nuclear bomb. All right then, it was fine. It's stupid, I guess. And no, I've heard the other thing as well. If again, this is from purists. I'm not necessarily a massive Godzilla fan, but I've picked up most of my stuff up from osmosis, I guess, of pop culture. People said like, oh well, if you can kill King Ghidorah, you'll easily handle Kong. But who knows? I guess he was a walking nuclear bomb, so that changed things. Rodan was fine. So was Mothra. They had their cool moments when they were fighting at the end. And of course, that's probably the best part of the movie is where he's using his neck as like a vape. Which was like, that was weird, but God, it was brutal, which was pretty cool. And at the end, Godzilla becomes the king of the monsters. And what this means, like, again, they didn't really tease Godzilla being Kong except for some brief glimpses of Kong, and over the end credits they had like, cave drawings of Kong and stuff. And that was another thing. Like, I was looking at the cast of who's back. I think Millie Bobby Brown is in Godzilla v Kong. Which, why? Like, her character wasn't that interesting, and I guess we're meant to just go, hey, I remember her. This is a cinematic universe. It's like, why is the kid there? I'm assuming, does that mean her parents are going to be there? She can't be there by herself. She doesn't really have any experience in monster, study. Her experience is she carried the sound box to a place to lure the monsters there, to Boston. And then there was a big monster fight in Boston. Anyone could have done that. Why are you putting the kid in there? I don't know. It doesn't matter, does it? I'm giving too much logic and thought to this movie. Was there anything else? Oh, at the end credits, post-credit scene. I think everyone was expecting something from the kind of tease Godzilla v Kong. What it actually is that they found the head of Ghidorah. Charles Dance, who's the head of this eco-terrorist group, buys it. So presumably that's going to be a tease for, Mecha Ghidorah or whatever, Mecha Ghidra. Who knows what they're going to do with it, or what the future for the Kong, or well, not Kong, future for the Godzilla franchise is after this, aside from Godzilla v Kong. Maybe he could pop up in that movie as well. Who knows? I'm guessing that like all of these movies is going to be like, oh, we need to fight. Oh, wait a minute, a bigger threat. I don't know. Again, this movie didn't do much for me. I thought it was dumb to the point where the plot didn't really sustain the whole runtime. Didn't find the characters interesting, and we get stuck with those characters for most of the movies. I did like the monster stuff, but a lot of the time it was poorly shot. So yeah, it felt like a few tweaks. This could have been a great movie, but unfortunately, it's just not good, in my opinion. Some people love this movie. I don't know why. I don't get it. And I saw a Twitter post today which had like a couple thousand people loving it, and it was like, don't listen to the critics. This is an amazing movie. Which there's always a thread like that for regardless of the movie, isn't there? It's not a good movie. Okay? You can enjoy it. You're going to be a guilty pleasure. But it's not only is it not a good movie, it's not the best version of what this movie should be or could be. Anyway, we'll see what happens when Godzilla and Kong might match up. I still think that the highlight of this franchise might be Kong Skull Island. Because it was campy and kind of weird. And the human characters in that were a bit more interesting. But, what do I know? I would say I rewatched the 2014 Godzilla movie, which I really did like when I saw it first. I kind of have a greater appreciation of it now. I actually didn't hate it as much as I did before, so maybe I'll change my opinion on this movie. But I doubt it. I don't particularly want to see it again. Then again, I probably said the same thing about the 2014 Godzilla. Alright, well, anyway, that's my Godzilla review. Okay, X-Men Dark Phoenix. Right, I don't know how to feel about this movie. It's getting absolutely shredded by critics. People don't like this movie. As I said earlier, it underperformed pretty severely. Like, it's weird. It's one of those movies that pretty much everyone is just completely ambivalent towards. And it's kind of understandable because the creative choices made here don't make a lot of sense. Like, they adapted a story for the second time. Same guy wrote it, I think. Simon Kinberg. It just seems pointless. It's added to the unnecessary nature of this whole movie, considering Marvel are going to swallow the whole thing up. How did I feel about it overall? I don't know. I don't know. I didn't like it. It's not good. I was mostly just didn't care about it. There was parts of it that were boring. In fact, most of it was boring. It felt like a TV movie a lot of the time, and it was a very expensive one. And granted, most of it's just people kind of standing around. There's not a lot of action in it. What else? I also laughed. I will say at times I wasn't meant to laugh. I don't know. It's okay. Let me think of some positives. The performances are actually pretty good. Sophie Turner, who I have to admit, I never thought much of her as an actor. You know, she was fine in Game of Thrones. She was suited to that part. I thought she was great in Apocalypse. She's not bad here. She's actually pretty good. And again, didn't think I would be saying that, but she is quite good. And of course, she has to carry a good chunk of the movie. And she does it quite well. Same with James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender. They've been a consistent highlight of all these movies. They've always given it their all, even if the movies themselves haven't even bothered trying. The rest of the cast, Nicholas Hoult is okay. I won't say he did a fantastic job or anything. Jennifer Lawrence, for what she's in, she's in the movie for a while. She seems bored and just kind of wants to get off set. Who else is there? Ty Sheridan, I think his name is, who plays Cyclops. He was fine, I guess. Nothing particularly noteworthy. Storm, I can't remember that. Alexander Driship, I think her name is, something like that. Yeah, she had nothing to do either. She wasn't that interesting. Same with Nightcrawler. He just didn't have much to do. And that's what it comes down to. Just really strange choices that they made the story again and more or less made the same story. I mean, what can I say? I don't know how much of this I can talk about without going into spoilers. I will say this. The movie starts with probably the closest thing we've gotten to an X-Men film, as in the X-Men we know there. And again, with all these X-Men films, forget about the previous entries, because they do. The timeline doesn't make any sense. They are in space and the world loves them and they're helping the president save astronauts or whatever. And it's pretty fun. I would say I actually liked the start of this movie. It was stupid, and at first I was like, wait a minute, wait. It's a strange left turn that the world seems to love him now, but okay, whatever. Disregard. Because they like, that's another thing I want to say, right? And I'll stop ragging on the timeline or whatever. Simon Kinberg wrote the last X-Men movie, X-Men Apocalypse, and that movie ended with basically Jean going like Phoenix and does the shape of the Phoenix and she's unlocked the power of the Phoenix. And then this movie is like, oh no, she didn't have the Phoenix. The Phoenix is up in space. That's how she gets the Phoenix. It's like, you really don't give a shit about consistent writing. But okay. Again, the space part was fun. Everyone kind of got to use some of their powers. And it felt like classic X-Men to a degree. And they were even wearing their costumes. Like, the costumes I didn't think were great, but they were faithful to a degree. It's like they at least tried. Again, I don't know why they didn't use the costumes they set up at the end of Apocalypse. Just another weird inconsistency. That was fun. Then, of course, as you've seen from the trailers, Jean gets infected by the Phoenix Force. And that's kind of where the movie goes downhill a bit. And it does so for most of the movie. Like, most of it's just boring. Didn't really care about anything that was happening. Oh, and haven't mentioned Jessica Chastain yet, who, holy shit. What a waste of a great actress, man. She's, like, again, I don't know what I can say here. Actually, you know what? Fuck it. This isn't a spoiler. The only reason this would be considered a spoiler is because they've been all secretive about the identity of his character for no reason. It's not an interesting character. Basically, Jessica Chastain is an alien that wants the Phoenix Force. Well, actually, she was a regular woman, and then an alien kind of stole her appearance. So I wonder if that was a case where they were going to be Skrulls originally, and then they changed it. I don't know. It's the most it's probably the worst villain I can remember. She just basically stands next to Jean for some of the movie and is like, oh, don't listen to them, they're trying to take the power. And then she's like, oh, I want the power. It's like like Jessica Chastain, who's a fantastic actress, totally wasted. Pointless. I don't know why she even said yes to this movie. But again, obviously there's a lot of problems behind the scenes with this film. We were talking about the end of the movie being changed, I think, before. How it was meant to be a big space battle and it was going to be something similar to another Marvel film. I've heard Civil War and Captain Marvel mentioned. So it wasn't going to be a big space battle. It's instead on a train. And you know what? It's one of the better parts of the movie. Like, there's some creative action and, resolution to some of the fights in this. It's like there's Magneto on a metal train, and we see the part in the trailer where he's using all these guns. Not always the most original, and there is a lot of deaths that are just like, oh, he fell from the train, you got pushed from the train, that are just pointless. But overall, that scene wasn't bad. There's other stuff I want to talk about in spoilers with regards to the ending, which I'll get to. Other thing I would say is the problem with this movie is that it's so lazy with the superheroes. So who do we have here? We have Beast, who, they've made big deals about him being, like, showing who he is for a long time. And that doesn't matter. This one, sometimes he's Beast, sometimes he's not. Fine. Whatever. It was always the king that he was meant to look like a beast. And the contrast to that between him being so brainy and being such a nice person, that's kind of thrown out. There's a kind of a Civil War thing. Again, I said this when I saw one of the trailers. It's pretty clear that there's a divide between the X-Men. Who else is in it? Mystique, again, she's another victim of Jennifer Lawrence obviously not wanting to sit in a makeup chair. Because they made a whole, again, like, fuck consistency in these movies. Like, the whole thing of like, oh, mutant and proud. And she's just like, I'm not being a mutant. I'm going to go walk around and look like Jennifer Lawrence because I'm not sitting in a makeup chair because I'm Jennifer Lawrence. I can't believe they got her back for this movie. But for nothing, really. Again, we'll get into that a bit more later. Cyclops doesn't really do much. He's just, unconditionally like, save Jean, I love Jean. He doesn't really give it any depth, which is fine. Magneto, pretty interesting. I liked some of the scenes. I think it's down to Fassbender. I really wish Fassbender picked better projects. He has not had a great film in a while, has he? Xavier had an interesting enough arc. Well, I mean, it's not really an arc. It's again, it's a film that you can't escape X-Men Last Stand with because it's so similar. Except the difference they make here, I guess spoilers if you don't know the Dark Phoenix story, if you don't know X-Men Last Stand, again, this is pretty early on in the movie. In X-Men The Last Stand, Xavier basically blocks off her abilities because she's a danger to herself and others. And those walls start erasing. She has to tap into the Phoenix Force to save the X-Men and X-Men 2. That's how she becomes Phoenix. They hinted that in Apocalypse, and then I guess they were like, oh, we need something a bit different because it would have literally been the same movie otherwise. So in this movie instead, it's that Xavier kind of blocks off some childhood trauma, which I won't say what it is because that probably would be a spoiler, to be fair. And it's not as villainous as the movie makes him out to be. I know it's not a great thing, but like it had more depth and more interest when it was blocking her powers for kind of self-preservation reasons, and the question of, did he have a right to do that? And it sounds like here, it was for her to be happy, for not just safety. It was more like she'd be a lot happier because it's pretty traumatic what happens to her, what she finds out about her past. And the other problem with it is just the fact that we haven't got to know these characters as well. And I will say, I think X-Men The Last Stand is a much better film in retrospect because of this movie. Because for all its faults, and look, obviously it has a lot of faults, it tries to do too much, and I mean, that's only one of the faults. It had a few things right that the Dark Phoenix War needs, which is a big scale. And again, at least this happened at the end of, 3 films where these were characters we got to know and care about. A lot of these characters, it just feels like, hey, you know these characters from the comics, or you know from outside sources, or from the previous trilogy. Don't you care about them now? And the film doesn't really give us a chance to. Really. I think that, as a result, I think the last time might actually be the better adaptation of this story. Which I didn't think I'd be saying at all. I don't know. It's kind of a letdown from that angle. And then you have the weird inclusion of some New Mutants, which is... and I don't mean the New Mutants, I mean New Mutants. Which was a baffling choice. Like, you have this whole library of X-Men characters to choose from, right? And 2 New Mutants that they bring into it. We have one who is a telepath, like Xavier, which is always incredibly boring, dull, mental fight, which is just them putting their hands to their temple and going like, ooh, very exciting stuff, isn't it? And then a guy who has like braids and just hits people with his braids and they're like unbreakable. That's so lame. There's a kind of a scene in New York where they're like they're attacking like over this small street trying to get to Jean. Both sides are trying to get to her. Yeah, it's nothing really. It's not that interesting a scene. I like, again, Magneto in that scene. It had some cool shots at that point. But yeah, this is not a good movie at all. It's not a good X-Men movie. I don't think it's the best Dark Phoenix story adaptation we've gotten. Yeah, it's just some baffling choices, some bad creative choices. And again, I'm spitballing here. I haven't written a review for this one. I might do a review for YouTube. That would be a bit more detailed and get into it a bit more. But yeah, it's not a good movie. It's such a shame that the X-Men franchise has gone out like this, because even though it's had highs and lows, and to be honest, if you look back at those movies, there's probably more highs than lows overall. I mean, there's some average ones in there as well, of course. This is such a nothing ending to it. It's really disappointing. But no, I mean, the writing's been on the wall for this one for years. So it's expected disappointment, which I guess if you knew you were going to be disappointed, I guess it's not a disappointment. It's just bad. Alright, let's talk spoilers with Dark Phoenix.
Spoiler.
Okay, so surprise, in the least surprising twist ever, because he clearly was eyeing the door and because the trailer pretty much gave it away. Jennifer Lawrence, Mystique, gets killed. Wow. And it's, there was rumours when the test screens were shown for this that it got laughs. I kind of laughed, to be honest. I don't know if this was the original dead or they refilmed it, but basically Gina's just like, leave me alone. And she kind of gives her a psychic push into like wood. And it does, like, if they showed it straight away going through her, that might have had some like, oh, impact. But it cuts to her face, and we obviously all know she's going to die. And it's just showing Jennifer Lawrence's face, just like, ah. And then it's like, oh, like, as if the audience is going to be like, oh, what happened? Is she okay? Something's happened to Mystique. Yeah, clearly she's dead. She's been stabbed with a bit of wood. Like, yeah, all right then. She's gone. Bye. And I mean, Jennifer Lawrence's role in this movie, aside from the opening, which again I thought was quite good, it's mostly just like, you're wrong, Professor, to be chasing the fame, which again is another weird subplot to add to this movie where Xavier is basically like, yeah, I'm gonna rub elbows with the president, baby. Oh, speaking of, they cut out one of the most hilarious lines in the trailer. There's in one of the more recent trailers for Dark Phoenix, there's like a reaction shot where Beast is like, Professor, oh no, it's Cyclops asking him. Cyclops is like, Professor, what do we do? And then James McAvoy snaps so quickly and just goes, I don't know what to do. They cut that out. Oh, what a shame. Because that was unintentionally hilarious. Like a bit of this movie. Another part I thought in the movie was really funny is Genosha, I guess it is, from the comics. Magneto is layered up there with a lot of mutants, and Jean comes to visit him being like, oh, who is, I need help. I'm evil now. You've killed people. How do you deal with killing people? And there's like an army helicopter that comes for Jean, and Jean is moving it with her mind, and Magneto is also moving it to prevent like her killing them, I guess. And they're both just like going like ooh with their hands out, you know, making weird faces, which I thought was kind of funny. It was ridiculous, but I don't know. I guess you can't be too critical. How do you make that look funny? I just thought it was funny. Like you see the helicopter kind of like the helicopter pilot like overacting, like steering helicopter being like whoa whoa whoa, you know. Oh well. What other spoilers are in this movie? I guess I haven't said much about Jessica Chastain's character. So they're an alien race that wants the Phoenix Force. And in a bit of logic that doesn't make any real sense, the Phoenix Force destroyed their planet, but the Phoenix Force is in space, and she can't take the Phoenix Force into her body. She's waiting for someone to be able to take it into her body, which obviously is Jean. But then at the end, she's like, oh, I can take the Phoenix Force off Jean, so why didn't she just take the Phoenix Force for herself to begin with? I don't know, maybe there's some convoluted, stupid reason for this, but it seemed kind of pointless. Again, her villain is one of the worst villains because there's just nothing to her. She just stands by Jean for the whole movie. I guess they were like, we can't have Jean be by herself the whole movie. Throw a weird generic alien character in there. We, of course, get another Quicksilver scene, which if you see the trailer with Quicksilver in it, that's what you get. That's it. And at least in the last few movies, they tried to sideline him with some logic or reasoning. This one, he's just not there. I guess he just doesn't give enough shit about Jean. So whatever. By Quicksilver. Very unimpressive Quicksilver scene in this film anyway. Also, yeah, in that scene where they're confronting Jean, and that's the Quicksilver scene, and Beast just has like a taser. Like, does he think that's going to do anything? And again, speaking of the uncreative uses of powers, Storm just seems to use lightning pretty much all the time. That's kind of what they're like, hey, that'll do as a power. And yeah, it feels like they're very unoriginal with the mutant superpowers in general. Talking a bit about the end of the film, as you can expect, Jean dies. She gets like, she's overpowered, and she's like, oh, I'm becoming something else. And here's where things get so stupid, right? So they rename, you know, Xavier's like, I'm out, I can't do this anymore, or blah, for not much reason, I guess, except Jean went crazy and he said he made some bad choices, which, you know, he probably did, but not as monstrous as the film makes it out to be. They renamed the school from Xavier School for Gifted Mutants to Jean Grey School for Gifted Mutants. Just as a reminder, Jean Grey killed loads of people in this movie. Innocent people. Why don't you name it after Mystique? Like a Raven Darkholm? No, whatever, it doesn't matter. So that was dumb. And then it's like the weird reality of this movie that where it's like they reset the continuity half the time. Because they're like, you only have to care about what the movie tells you to care about and remember. So the end of this film is like, I'm guessing this was a reshoot where they were like, hey, if this is going to be the last X-Men movie, let's give it a kind of like, let's bring it all around the circle and then it'll seem really clever. And it's like Xavier and Magneto, they're just at some cafe. It's like the Dark Knight Rises ending, which I'm sure everyone is saying. And he's like, comes along and he's just like, hey, let's have a game of chess, old friend. Like, look, I mean, Magneto's a multiple mass murderer. Remember, he tried to kill the president. He killed a lot of people in the last one, but sure, just play chess there. And then, of course, we get the weird ending where you see an actual like massive phoenix fly through space and like in the sky, out of the atmosphere, which I guess we're meant to be like, that's Jean. She's a giant space bird now. Yay! She's still out there somewhere. Yeah, stupid shit. Didn't really care for it. This movie in general. And that's it. That's the X-Men. They're gone now. And I guess, I think they deserve better. Logan would have been a great ending to this whole series, but now it doesn't matter. Because it's gone back to Marvel. I guess they'll release New Mutants, maybe. Apparently. Then again, we've heard that before. So yeah, I didn't really care that much for Dark Phoenix. Alright, so that's my review of Dark Phoenix. As I said, it's a bit more scattered. If I do put a review up on YouTube, just check it out. And you should check out the YouTube channel in general, because I got a few things coming up that I'm very excited about. I might talk about briefly at the end of this podcast. And again, my best reviews probably go up there. I might even cut these reviews out entirely in future installments, but we shall see. And with that said, we're going to go to this week's topic. And I'm referring it to as Godzilla Is A Bomb. and something along those lines anyway. I'm talking about the sort of, I guess I won't call it a myth, but the oversimplification of the idea that Godzilla represents the nuclear bomb that hit Nagasaki and Hiroshima. But we're going to talk a bit about the origin about it and what it really represents, and just some interesting stuff about Godzilla. So here we go. This is this week's feature. The theme of the film from the beginning was the terror of the bomb. Mankind had created the bomb, and now nature was going to take revenge on mankind. That's a quote from Tomoyuki Tanaka on the original 1954 film Gojira, or Godzilla as Western audience will come to know it as. Tanaka being one of the producers behind the film, who actually helped create the King of Monsters. And the King of the Monsters has often been tied to the bomb. It's no real coincidence then that such a prominent cultural symbol would come from the one country to suffer devastation and nuclear bombs, Japan. In fact, the initial reaction to Godzilla in Japan was rather mixed, seeing it as exploitative of the suffering Japan had endured. After all, it had been less than a decade since the bombs had been dropped on Japan, and the occupation of Japan by American forces had only ended about 2 years earlier. The wounds the country had from the war were still somewhat fresh, and people who had lived to see the devastation of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the fallout from it, were understandably shocked and even upset. Not to mention, survivors of the bombings were ostracised for many years after, and it was no doubt a painful reminder of those still suffering due to the attack from radiation poisoning and other radioactive illnesses. It won't be till Godzilla got more favourable reactions in America in 1956 that Japanese critics would start to re-evaluate the film, which was a financial success even though it was uncomfortable for many Japanese audiences. This version was heavily edited and removed much of the film's original politics. For a long time, this version was actually the only version that was widely available and used. The American version cut out about 15 minutes, a lot of which were mentions of the evils of nuclear weaponry. Now, for the record, I've only seen the original Japanese version, but many have only witnessed the American re-edit, which is a bit goofier. The original is a lot more serious. In fact, for a long time, people were unaware of how much Godzilla had been cut from the international version, which became the go-to cut for many audiences. It would only be in 2004, when the original cut was released, how clear it was that the original was an anti-war and anti-arms film. This might be where we get the rather broad statement that Godzilla is a personification of the atom bomb, which is a little bit too simple. It's long been said that Godzilla is a metaphor for the nuclear bomb, and to a certain degree that is true, but it's a bit more complex than that. But there is a lot of metaphor and meaning to be derived from the original Godzilla film. Let's go back a bit and explore Godzilla's origin first, and no, I don't mean its fictional origin, I mean the inspiration for its creation. For one, we have The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, a 1953 American monster film. In that movie, our monster is awoken by a nuclear test and ends up going on a rampage, which should sound familiar. Godzilla took a lot of inspiration from the film. But what is interesting is not how they are similar, but how they are different. Many American monster movies follow the very simple logic of nature gone awry, and that we should leave nature to its own devices, and there's a hint of that in The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. There isn't much responsibility to it though. Even though essentially they made the monster, it's just a threat to be vanquished, with no real reflection into any karmic justice or their role in its creation. More important is that the beast is only woken up by the tests. Godzilla, on the other hand, comes from the sea and is woken by nuclear tests, but takes on some properties of the bomb. He's essentially immune to nukes and has atomic breath. So it speaks to a difference in ideologies between the US and Japan regarding nuclear weapons, but also the role of a perpetrator and a victim with regards to nuclear arms. For example, is it not fitting that while the Americans had no real responsibility towards nuclear weapons and that their character had no properties of the bomb, that the Japanese monster took on some of the effects of a use of a nuclear weapon, much like the Japanese people themselves would have when they were bombed. People take on radioactive illnesses, for example, same way that Godzilla takes on some radioactive properties. The truth of the matter is that while the nuclear bombs in 1945 inform a lot of the movie, Godzilla's origin actually has a different, albeit still a nuclear one. It came the exact same year that Godzilla was released. The Lucky Dragon No. 5 incident. In March of 1954, the United States detonated the largest weapon ever tested by them at Bikini Atoll, and what ensued would be a stark reminder to the people of Japan that they may never escape the threat of nuclear weapons and the horrors of the past. A small Japanese fishing boat was fishing outside the declared danger zone at a nuclear test, and unfortunately, the test was more than twice as powerful as expected, and a change in weather caused the nuclear fallout to blow outside the danger zone, resulting in acute radiation syndrome for 23 members of the crew. It also contaminated some fish that made it to the market and was consumed, and Japan was once again living in fear of nuclear radiation. It would strengthen the interest in an anti-nuclear movement and call for disarmament of nuclear arms. Perhaps, if nothing else, the story of Lucky Dragon number 5 may show why Godzilla is depicted as a monster from the sea that is awakened by a bomb, as the incident did awake much of the nuclear terror that Japan hoped to forget. Godzilla was a reminder that such horrors could not be easily forgotten. Godzilla was essentially forcing viewers to revisit their dark past at the hand of nuclear warfare. It was one of the first films to examine and remember the trauma of the bombings, and many weren't ready for that. In the original Godzilla, the monster is awakened by underground hydrogen bomb tests, and the film states that he likely was underground for years until frequent tests destroyed his habitat. He is a product and a reminder of what the bomb has done to Japan, and whether or not the horrors it unleashed can ever truly be remedied. Imagery in the film of mourning children, burning cities, and the sick and wounded capture what no doubt would have been the results in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The film doesn't shy away from this. Comparisons to real-life events are also prevalent in the film. Characters mention that destroying Godzilla could finally erase the damage of the bomb, and another mentions their survival of Nagasaki and that they are, as a result, determined to survive Godzilla as well. A central plot point resolves around the creation of a superweapon called the Oxygen Destroyer, arguing that creating it will mean the superpowers of the world force them to create more of them, and it ends with a reminder that further nuclear testing could lead to the rise of another Godzilla. Many critics note that the monster is treated not as some supernatural threat or a natural occurrence, but instead as sort of an expected result of mankind's actions sent by God. The idea essentially being that for making such a horrific creation as the atom bomb, they deserve to be punished. That in making something so ungodly as the bomb, God responded with a karmic attack in the form of Godzilla. At least that's the opinion of some in their interpretation of the arrival and treatment of Godzilla in the film. Of course, if that was the case, what horrible god would unleash the fury on the victim of the bomb rather than the creator of it? And you could reframe it to say that Japan feels a certain responsibility for the bombings due to their role in World War II, and the actions committed along with the escalation of war meant that a certain degree of reprisal was inevitable, even if something as devastating as Hiroshima and Nagasaki could not have really been predicted. Big part of the war meant a significant loss of life would occur. By that logic, the bombings, and in context Godzilla, is somewhat a result of Japan's actions, which sounds very, very harsh and probably even mean, but there is a certain logic and basis to this in Japanese culture and in the context of the film. The movie, in a lot of ways, forced people to realise the extent of which Japan has some responsibility, if not in the creation of the bomb, then the factors that led to it. And certainly the reaction and reluctance to help some of those affected and to fully explore the trauma from the event in order to move on. In fact, there's probably a more worrying aspect to this when you look at the Godzilla series as a whole. Looking still at the first film, we have the fact that the movie only gained major popularity off its American release, which stripped away much of the politics of it. Which is a little upsetting that essentially, in a metaphor for the destruction of the bomb, the people who dropped the bomb essentially changed it to the point that it rarely addressed it, and the victims preferred it to addressing the horrors of the past, which is a bit of a downer. Then you also have the fact that subsequent Godzilla films moved in a campier and sillier direction, and have to acknowledge that the metaphor is somewhat dampened by the sequels. And sure, maybe you could explore the idea that embracing their history and acknowledging the destruction of the bomb, that they're able to move on to a more upbeat future, but I don't know if that works either. Then you have another point to pick up on, which is that in American remakes of Godzilla, we sort of get a praise of the military-industrial complex in what began as an indictment of their use of nuclear weapons. That's not to say that it fully abandons the core idea behind Godzilla and its origin as a product of the bomb. The Comic-Con trailer for Gareth Edwards' 2014 adaptation is perhaps proof of this.
Vishnu takes on its multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds."
In case you need a quick reminder or a brief history lesson, that's the voice of J. Robert Oppenheimer, one of the lead scientists on the Manhattan Project, which created the atomic bomb, and he's often referred to as the father of the atom bomb. And when he saw the test, those words from Hindu scripture entered his mind. "Now I am become death, destroyer of worlds." It seems rather appropriate for Godzilla too, and also hints at his nuclear origin. What is clear is that the idea that Godzilla is the embodiment of the bomb is an oversimplification of the more complex themes of the movie. He is more the embodiment of fears of nuclear annihilation, and while a bomb threatens the same thing, it is portrayed differently and for good reason. Godzilla speaks to the Japanese people specifically and plays on the horrors of the trauma after Fukushima and Nagasaki. with imagery consistent with those bombings. Godzilla is not simply the bomb, he is a product of it, a reminder that Japan might still be dealing with the fallout of 1945, and a reminder to others of the damage nuclear weapons can have, and an urge to dismantle so as to avoid future monstrous destructions at the hands of super weapons. While the important message might have been muddled for the campiness of later sequels or remakes, the message in the original is clear and loud as a protest to nuclear arms. The death and devastation of the bomb is one thing, but the representation indicates that the initial attack was horrible, but the wounds and trauma of the bomb went beyond those two attacks and casualties, and that Japan still had some healing to do before it could fully recover from nuclear panic and pain. So there you have it, Godzilla's relationship with the bomb. I'm going to briefly, I guess, offer an apology, not entirely sincere, but just in case. I started recording it the day before today. In other words, I've been recording it for 2 days. The first day I was recording it, I felt okay. I wasn't necessarily too sick. Second day, I was evidently a lot worse. So there may be some inconsistencies, some stopping and starting, which was mainly because I decided I should pause the recording so as not to blow out the microphone or your eardrums. So it might be a bit stoppy-starty. Some of the levels might be off. My voice itself might change. I say that as I'm like a kid going through puberty, but it really is just that I'm evidently a bit more sick than I realised initially. But it is what it is. This show, I tried to make it a bit slimmer, cut it down a little bit, as I'll probably continue to do because I don't want the show to be over long. So you might see those reviews disappearing from the podcast and going straight to YouTube from now on. We shall see. But speaking of YouTube, that is the place to be. I think I'm putting a lot more focus on that lately. Certainly regarding reviews, and I'm hoping this week, I was going to launch it at the weekend, but I have a new series that I'm going to start on YouTube, which I am very excited for, and hopefully it'll be great. I'm not going to say what it is. You just have to check out Pop Cult Pod on YouTube and find out for yourself. Again, apologies for the sniffling and coughing if I don't think any got through, but just in case you hear any of that stuff, or me wiping my nose. That's the reality of having a podcast, folks. The glamour and glitz of a runny nose and a stifled up throat. That's not a word even. I'm not cutting this anymore. Okay, this is what you get if you've listened this far. Tough shit. All right. Next week, what do we have? Next week, I'll be covering E3 in depth. I don't know if I'm going to cover any movie news or TV news next week unless there's a massive story or a big trailer. That's one of the reasons I held off on releasing this until after the Frozen 2 trailer. What else do I need to say? If you want to reach out to the podcast, maybe you have issue with me not blowing my nose or sniffing. Maybe you don't like the podcast. Maybe you love the podcast. I'd love to hear what you say regardless. You can contact the podcast on email, popcultpod@gmail.com. You can hit me up on Instagram, popcultpod, all one word. Twitter, pop_cult_pod. Or join the Pop Cult Compound on Facebook under Pop Cult Compound, of course. And if you are listening to this on iTunes, please give us a positive review. And wherever you are listening to this, please be sure to subscribe. And certainly subscribe on YouTube, because there's a lot more goodness coming to YouTube very, very soon. And if you don't see it, who the hell is going to see it? Okay? Because I cannot spell cult without you.